June 2025 marks a decisive turning point in the Middle East. The direct confrontation between Israel and Iran with the involvement of the United States. The series of military strikes, nuclear threats, and shifting alliances are disrupting an already fragile regional balance. Even worse, this war escalates into a crisis throughout the entire Middle East and is not limited to a bilateral rivalry. It exposes the internal weaknesses of states, reveals the dependence of global economies on strategic maritime routes, and tests the ability of outside powers to manage instability that has become systemic in today's world. From Ukraine to Congo, including Sudan and Myanmar. To understand the issues, it is necessary to lay the groundwork, to combine the analysis of Iran's internal dynamics, Israel's strategic constraints, geopolitical shifts, and economic vulnerabilities. By relying on concrete examples and verifiable data, and that's what I will try to present to you today in this video, which will not be an easy task. Without making big predictions or grand speeches, but simply to remind you of the fundamentals of geopolitics and to start together on a solid foundation for what may become a series of videos about this conflict. Welcome to Terra Bellum. Today, the digital world has become a real arena where major issues are at stake, whether in Saudi Arabia or in France. Control of information, surveillance, cyber attacks, but also the blocking of websites. Ensuring freedom and security online is more essential than ever. That's exactly what NordVPN offers, far beyond just a simple tool to change your location or unblock geo-restricted content. Thanks to its threat protection, NordVPN actively protects you against malware, trackers, and malicious sites, even when the VPN is turned off. This continuous protection is designed for anyone who stays informed, works, or browses every day in an increasingly complex digital environment. The NordVPN Plus subscription also includes NordPass, an advanced password manager. It generates strong passwords, stores them securely, and alerts you if your data appears in a leak. A major asset in the face of increasing cyber threats. Add to that end-to-end encryption, a strict no-logs policy, the ability to connect up to 10 devices simultaneously, and a kill switch feature that cuts your internet connection if the VPN protection weakens. Use the link in the description to get 4 free months with a 2-year subscription for just €3 per month and a 30-day money-back guarantee. We've never heard so much about Iran, and paradoxically, we've never known so little about it. Iran has nearly 89 million inhabitants, according to the World Bank in 2025. It's one of the youngest countries in the region, with 60% of its population under 35 years old. This young population is 76% urban and massively connected, with more than 72 million Iranian internet users, according to Statista. So here we have all the characteristics of a globalized population, and therefore exposed to Western models. A population that aspires to more freedom, modernity, and economic prosperity, but faces 2 obstacles. The state apparatus, dominated by conservative religious leaders and the Revolutionary Guards. The Pastoran, who control more than 30% of the formal economy through foundations and semi-state holdings. The second obstacle is the massive international sanctions on Iran, imposed mainly by the United States, the European Union, and other countries. Since 1979, with a significant tightening since 2006, and regular updates as the geopolitical situation evolves. These sanctions have plunged Iran into an economic crisis that would be hard to imagine in Europe, marked by a sharp drop in oil exports, which represent about 10% of Iran's GDP. Runaway inflation, officially 45%, according to the IMF, and a depreciation of its currency and above all the country's isolation from global financial markets. This situation has led to a general increase in prices, a decrease in purchasing power, and a rise in unemployment, 9.7%, but over 23% among young graduates. And of course, difficulties in accessing certain essential products, especially medicines. The entire population, especially the middle and lower classes, are experiencing a decline in their standard of living and increasing insecurity, while the country's prospects for growth and development remain severely limited. This situation encourages student migration, which is expected to reach 120,000 people in 2025, with a return rate to Iran of only 1% and 68% of young Iranians expressing the desire to emigrate. A romantic view would point to political motives, but according to the CSDI, it is mainly the economic crisis and lack of prospects that are driving them to leave. In summary, economic sanctions are slowly killing Iran by depriving it of part of its youth. And if we see it on video today, keep in mind that the Iranian authorities see it too. Iran is also a multi-ethnic empire. Persians make up 61% of the population, followed by Azerbaijanis. At 16% Kurds, at 10% Lurs, at 6% Arabs, Baloch, and Turkmens, each around 2%, as well as other regional minorities. These peoples have been in decline for decades, even millennia. But this diversity brings its share of complexity and more or less pronounced separatist demands, especially with the Kurds and the Baloch, as we have seen in an old video more than a year ago, and who can weaken Iran from within through external interference. Add to all this an increasingly difficult rift to heal between civil society and the religious state. The protests in 2019, 2022, and 2023 brought together up to 2 million people despite a crackdown that caused more than 500 deaths in 2022, according to Amnesty International. And yet, despite everything I've just mentioned since the beginning of this video, Iran is holding on for now. The election of the reformist president Masoud Pezeshkian in 2024 revealed the aspiration for openness, but the president's room for maneuver remains limited in the face of the supreme leader and the Revolutionary Guards. I invite you to watch last year's video on the Iranian elections again. However, the disappearance of key figures, including President Ebrahim Raisi, who died in an accident in May 2024, has weakened political continuity and opened the way to new power struggles in Iran. The reformists are trying to take advantage of the conservatives' waning influence to push for a gradual restructuring of the Islamic Republic. For example, there is a divide over the hijab. It has become a symbol in Iran that illustrates this tension. The religious authorities demand strict enforcement, while the reformists warn about the risk of an uprising. Obviously, the internal debates go further than that, such as the management of the economic crisis, foreign policy, and the role of women in society, which reveal an ideological competition and a truly unprecedented political debate within the government. This brings us to the figure of Reza Pahlavi, heir to the last Shah of Iran. You have probably seen his speeches in the media, where he remains a media figure, but mainly among the Iranian diaspora, with 4 million Iranians abroad, including 1 to 1.5 million in the United States. Pahlavi advocates for a democratic transition and a 100-day plan for the rebuilding of the state. But polls, like Iran poll in 2024, show that less than 15% of Iranians see him as a credible alternative. The majority of Iranians are distrustful of the idea of a return to the monarchy, even a constitutional one, especially from abroad. This is the complexity that many cannot or do not want to recognize when it comes to Iran. The real opposition is internal and fragmented. It ranges from reformists who choose to fight at the ballot box, to ethnic nationalists, to various secular groups, and even to military groups like the People's Mujahideen. The opposition in all its forms has not waited for, and does not seem to be waiting for, the return of a Pahlavi to power. Ultimately, the exchanges of gunfire and bombings are only the visible expression and the continuation of this shadow war that has been going on for decades between Iran, Israel, and the United States. The fall of al-Assad's Syria in 2024 and the weakening of the Lebanese Hezbollah have deprived Iran of its main regional allies. The logistical corridor that connected Tehran to the eastern Mediterranean has been cut off, limiting Iran's ability to project military and diplomatic power. And while in Iraq the Shia militias still retain some influence, the central government is also seeking to rebalance its alliances. Despite this isolation, Iran still has some advantages. According to the ISS, its ballistic arsenal is estimated at a minimum of more than 3,000 missiles of varying range. Recognized offensive cyber capabilities, with more than 200 major attacks attributed to Iran between 2022 and 2024, according to FireEye, and active allies in Yemen, Iraq, and possibly still in Syria. Intelligence networks and sectarian alliances, especially with Shia minorities in the Gulf, allow Tehran to maintain a capacity for regional disruption, or rather, from a diplomatic perspective, regional deterrence directed against Israel. And Israel, let's talk about it. The country is facing unprecedented operational pressure. Since October 2023, the war in Gaza has caused more than 35,000 Palestinian deaths, according to the OCAS, and has mobilized nearly 60,000 Israeli soldiers. In the West Bank, security operations and blockades have intensified, while Israel and its settlers control more than 60% of the province. 2024 has seen a 27% increase in arrests and a rise in violent incidents. In southern Lebanon, the IDF keeps 15,000 troops on alert against Hezbollah, while in Syria, strikes against Iranian positions and then against militias, or the new Syrian Authority, have intensified. This increase in fronts is stretching the capabilities of the Israeli army. The Israeli defense budget reached $28.8 billion in 2025, which is 5.2% of its GDP, according to SIPRI. Logistics, troop morale, and the rotation of hundreds of thousands of reservists are being severely tested. I'd point you to the video on the pillars of Israeli strategic defense so you can learn more about it. The country therefore relies heavily on American support, with about $3.8 billion in annual military aid, supplies of precision munitions, Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow systems, satellite intelligence. And without this support, Israel would see its room for maneuver reduced, especially against Iran, which it considers to have existentially threatening capabilities. What is this existential threat? It is, of course, the Iranian nuclear weapon, or at least the possibility that Iran could acquire one. Because here again, we need to be nuanced. In 2025, Iran has about 408 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% and a total stock of more than 9,200 kilos of uranium, according to the IAEA. This nuclear latency allows it to deter its adversaries without, for now, crossing the nuclear threshold while still keeping room for negotiation. Until today, the Iranian doctrine theoretically excludes the production of an operational nuclear weapon, with the supreme leader remaining opposed to the bomb out of fear of an uncontrollable escalation. Iran therefore uses its status as a threshold state as a tool of deterrence, while still remaining within the framework of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The main concern is that the Israeli strikes, followed by American ones, could produce the opposite effect of what is intended. Instead of slowing down the Iranian nuclear program, they could actually accelerate its militarization. Iran could then choose to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty and cross the nuclear threshold. A classic scenario in geopolitics where external pressure strengthens a state's determination to acquire an ultimate deterrent capability. American and French intelligence services also believe that if the political decision were made, Iran would apparently be able to produce a bomb in less than 6 months. I'll stop here on the issue of uranium and nuclear matters, and I invite you to watch the more comprehensive video I've made on this subject, while still looking at it from a geopolitical perspective. Israeli and American strikes have damaged several Iranian nuclear sites, temporarily slowing down the country's nuclear program. However, despite the destruction of these sites, Iran certainly retains part of its capabilities and will be able to resume its activities in the medium term. Not to mention that the breakdown of the partnership between the IAEA and Iran will make the enrichment process and Iran's nuclear threshold status much more opaque than before. In short, Iran is fully capable of continuing its usual doctrine. Another effect of the strikes is that the deaths of several top Iranian military officials in recent Israeli attacks have shifted Iran's military power balance. And this is one of the few, if not the only, shifts in balance that can be seen as a result of this war. The regular Iranian army has gained importance. It now holds 3 seats on the country's main security council, compared to just 1 for the Revolutionary Guards. This marks an unprecedented shift in power, of course, though we can't yet measure the consequences, except that the army is traditionally more politically neutral than the Revolutionary Guards. In response to the American airstrikes on June 22 against its nuclear facilities, Iran retaliated the very next day by launching a barrage of missiles at American bases in Qatar and Iraq. This operation, which Tehran called Announcement of Victory, involved the use of short-range ballistic missiles, such as the Fateh 110 and the Qiyam 1, demonstrating Iran's ability to strike quickly despite the partial degradation of its launch infrastructure due to recent Israeli strikes. A notable fact is that Iran had informed Doha and Washington in advance of its intention. This raises questions about its objectives, namely to limit casualties and avoid a major escalation, while projecting a tough stance at home. Or it could reflect internal divisions, with some factions in Iran favoring a moderate response to avoid further American retaliation. In any case, the strikes caused no casualties and only minor damage, as air defenses intercepted most of the missiles. A few hours later, American President Donald Trump announced a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, a fragile truce as you might expect, because despite the hundreds of missiles fired at Israel since 2024 and the dozen launched at American bases during this latest attack, Iran probably still has a significant ballistic arsenal. However, sanctions and dependence on imported components, such as ammonium perchlorate, limit its ability to quickly replenish its stockpiles. Furthermore, Israeli strikes are said to have destroyed between a third and half of Iran's launchers, although according to the United States there are still hundreds of solid-fuel mobile systems remaining, which are difficult to locate and neutralize and can be deployed quickly. In addition to these ballistic capabilities, there are thousands of cruise missiles and drones, including Shahed kamikaze drones, notably the Shahed 136 model, which can reach a range of 2,000 kilometers. For Tehran, its ballistic arsenal is the central pillar of its deterrence and represents the most serious threat to American and Israeli forces in the region, due to their speed and range. Thus, the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which was targeted during the attack, is only about 1,000 kilometers from Iran, just like the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. And in reality, the 20 or so American military installations in the Middle East are within range of Iranian missiles. Many benefit from multi-layered air defenses, such as Patriot and THAAD systems, and from close coordination with host countries. The low intensity of the Iranian strikes suggests they aimed to show these installations were within range, not to destroy them. For their part, the United States has considerable resources. In the region, there are 40,000 to 50,000 soldiers, 200 to 300 fighter jets, 2 carrier strike groups, up to 9 guided missile destroyers, several cruisers equipped with the Aegis system, and at least 1 submarine armed with Tomahawk missiles. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced in the American fleet, has probably already arrived in the area. Trump's announcement of the ceasefire suggests that Washington will not retaliate, and that the exchange of fire between Iran and the United States was almost cordial, as if to signal the end of hostilities, at least in the short term, because it is more than likely that the United States will strengthen their regional air defense, as well as the Israeli air defense systems and their renewal. These measures would therefore aim to better protect American and Israeli forces and to reassure allies as part of a regional geopolitical reshuffling, while guaranteeing the rights of American bases in the area. Whatever developments may come, open war is once again giving way to shadow warfare. The United States aims to assert its determination and position itself as continental powers, rise in an increasingly multipolar world, while avoiding an uncontrolled escalation in an already tense international context. The June 2025 crisis highlights how fragile the balances in the Middle East are, torn between internal rivalries, military tensions, nuclear issues, and economic vulnerability. Iran, under pressure both from outside and inside, seeks to preserve its influence through an ambiguous nuclear strategy and assertive diplomacy. Israel, for its part, faces unprecedented operational pressure and remains highly dependent on American support. The United States, for its part, is striving to maintain a regional balance that is favorable to them, with Trump even warning Israel in a recent statement. But the question remains, how long can this position hold? The cracks in the system are becoming increasingly difficult to hide, with the threat of uncontrolled escalation. Even a temporary return to peace will depend on securing strategic maritime routes, especially the Strait of Hormuz, and above all, on the ability of the parties to engage in credible negotiations aimed at resolving the crisis. Because if the fighting has suddenly stopped, it's because Iran and the United States seem to have agreed to resume dialogue. Yet, each power is moving along a razor's edge, where the slightest mistake could plunge the region into deep instability with global repercussions. I hope this video has given you some insight. As always, the goal is not to make sweeping predictions or cover everything about the topic, but to offer you a perspective on events that goes beyond cliches in about 15 minutes. If you're interested in the topic, I recommend looking into it further on your own and also checking out our previous videos about Iran, especially those on last year's elections. Thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Get 4 months free on any 2-year plan via the link below. Their support helps us continue making these analyses. And above all, thank you. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, comment, and share. It really helps the channel grow, especially with YouTube's ruthless algorithms. I'm also curious to hear your feedback. This was Quentin for Terra Bellum. Thanks for your loyalty. See you soon.